Okay, so in the last recording, I ran some code here to create we actually created a new NextJS app, but basically what I did was I copied a command that my buddy Sahil sent me to test out whether or not I had Node installed on the computer. We used Homebrew to install Node, and we got it working. And we ran this. I'm going to paste this in here. So this was npx create next app latest. And what that did, it ran successfully, and it created a bunch of files. So npx is basically going to go and create a new Next.js project in our code directory here, and there it is, test1. So we made these folders with a bunch of files, and I don't really know how Next.js works, so that's something I'm going to learn along the way. But what I do know is that this essentially is now the framework for any kind of SaaS app that you might need, and this sort of bundle of files represents a basic template of code that we can then modify and extend. And what I want to do today is to get essentially it's like the hello world of deploying a SaaS app, which is to have some code on your machine, push that code up to GitHub in this case, although there's a couple of other options, but some place that hosts that code in the cloud, and then deploy that code on some sort of hosting platform. In this case, I'm going to try Vercel, which is something I also have never used before because that's reasonably new, or at least wasn't around the last time I was shipping code. And I'm going to kind of do all this just not really actually trying to understand what's going on with the code, but just to get something that I have pushed from my computer out onto a URL that I can then share with a friend, and they can see something that is the output of the code. So I'm going to start over here. So you can see here that I'm in this test1. Test1 is this folder here, right? So again, if you just open up a fresh terminal, you'll be at tilde, which is your root directory. So I would go cd code and then test1. So that's how, again, I'm going to get into here, right? Root directory, code, test1. This is my Next.js app that got created for me. So now that I'm in here, I can run npm run dev. So each of the kind of core languages, frameworks, etc., is going to have some way for you to run a server on your machine. So basically, it'll allow you it'll find this bundle of code, load it up, and let you access it in the browser, but only I will be able to do that. So in this case, it's called npm run.dev. And then, for example, if you're using Ruby on Rails, I'll have to look it up, but there's an equivalent command that you can run that basically says, take this code and run it on a local server. And so this is running right now. So it's gone here, grabbed all this code, loaded it into local server, and I can go here. This is the URL, localhost 3000, and this is a local URL. So if I copied this link and sent it to a friend, they would not be able to see this. This is only something that I can access because this code is also on my browser. And so you can see, actually, if I go to Control-C, that will turn this off, and I reload this, it doesn't work. Right? So what's happening is this is a process that's running, that's grabbing that code and making it available to localhost 3000. So if I press up again, run dev, now it's starting. Now I go back, I refresh the page, and you can see it's responding, right? So it got that request, and it did a GET request, which is, hey, I want this page, and it sent it back, basically. And so this is being generated by this whole bundle of code that was generated in test1. So cool. And I guess Next.js is like owned by or managed by Vercel, because it says, hey, deploy here, sends. And the first thing it's going to ask me is to import a Git repository. So what this means is I'm going to have to get my code, I guess. Yeah, so basically the code is just sitting here on my computer, and Vercel needs some way to access it. And the main intermediary for that is a Git repository, which would be something like GitHub. So I already have a GitHub account. So this is where you would stop and go and create a GitHub account. And I'm going to pause this for a second while I make sure that my GitHub account is in good working order, and come back. Okay, so just getting back up to speed on Git and GitHub. I will do a full deep dive on what Git is. Basically, Git is a version control system that essentially allows you to keep track of an entire code base and to keep track of the changes and merge them. So if, for example, we have a massive code base and I take a bit of it and I make a couple changes to it and you take a bit of it and you make a couple changes to it, then Git is the tool that allows us to make sure that, my changes get merged in and your changes get merged in, and we all end up with one merged flow of code. But it's also just a tool for moving code from your local computer to GitHub. And it looks like GitHub now has something called GitHub Desktop, which looks great because I don't really feel like doing a lot of stuff in the command line. I would much rather use a tool. So we're going to install that. If it takes a while, I'm going to pause it. But it looks like there is a nice tool for that. So let's see what happens. I'm going to pause it. I might pause this if it's boring. Pause again. Okay, we've got GitHub app installed. Ooh. Oh boy. That's not what we want. Let's just authorize the whole thing. Authenticate using the passkey below. Alright, hold on. Okay, we are in with GitHub Desktop. I went to File, Add a local repository. I went in here and I chose my test one. I'm going to add repository here. Let's see. Yeah, create a repository. It's a test NextJS app. And we're just going to create the repository. So repository is basically the same as a project, I think, in GitHub. More or less, this is going to be... GPG failed to sign the data. Okay. We are going to have to Google and figure this out. Hold on. Okay, so apparently, again, I'm going back to Claude. GPG failed to sign the data. This says that Git is trying to sign your commits but can't find the corresponding private GPG key on your system. And it asked me to do this to list secret keys, and it got nothing. So we are going to make a new key. GPG, sorry, no terminal at all requested. Can't get input. Interesting. Is it this? This is new for me, working with Claude. I got this error. This happens because GPG needs a way to securely get information to you. To make the setting. Alright, so Okay, so it's telling me something. So this echo is interesting because this is basically echo is going to add this text to the .zshrc file. So let's give it a shot. And then this basically reloads the .zsh file. All right, let's see if this works again. So again, classic move, try something, doesn't work, try some other stuff, go back, try it again. Same error. Let's try this as well. Okay, we decided we're just going to use the command line here. So inside of GitHub, I went and created a new repository, calling it the same test1, and then I am basically following these instructions here. So you're just copy pasting each of these lines of code, right? So git init adds git, add commit. Let's go ahead and just keep working with it. Why not? Git remote add origin. What this is going to do is going to connect to this repo on GitHub. Error, remote origin already exists. Okay, great. And then we're going to push this code to it. And I'm going to introduce. Okay, so that was a little bit of a detour, which sometimes happens. I'm not sure if I'm going to edit out the entire faffing around with trying to authenticate with GitHub, but what I needed to do was to somehow create a secure connection between my computer and my GitHub account. And where I landed on as the easiest way is not that. It was this command line tool, or CLI, command line interface, for connecting to GitHub. So there were a bunch of ways listed, but this one looked like it made sense. And here we go. I know I like Homebrew. Homebrew works for me. So I just did brew install GH, which you can see happened up here. It installed some tools for basically terminal tools for connecting to GitHub. And then it was quite easy. All I had to do was this GitHub auth login. And then I connected to GitHub. And then the commands here worked. So this basically git push to origin. Origin is, again, like you can think of it as the origin is on the internet, right? This is being hosted here. And this pushes the code from that local folder to a repository on GitHub. And if I refresh the page, I should see the files from my NextJS app that was created locally. Great. Now we have it here. And we can go back to Vercel. Let's see if we can get this all working. So continue with GitHub. Let's authenticate that. So Vercel. Install the GitHub application for the accounts you wish to import. Huh? Okay. Now, I'm going to only do a select repository, And I'm going to do that test one here. Here we go. Yeah, I'm just going to install that for now. I'll come back to it later. Great. So we'll follow this. NextJS. I'm just going to do a framing preset, NextJS. Yeah, let's just try it. See what happens. So basically, Vercel is now importing this code from GitHub. I've connected the two of them. It's pulling in the latest code, and it's going to put it on a server. So it's essentially going to do the equivalent of when I ran NVM. Again, I don't really know much about NextJS, but when I did this NVM run dev, right, that is kind of loading up the code from my local machine and putting it in a server that can then be accessed by the browser. Vercel is going to do that for the entire World Wide Web, right? So now the code has been pushed from my computer to GitHub, and what Vercel is going to do is grab that code and make it available in the browser, and ideally that'll be something that I could then share that link with anybody. And yeah, test one nextjs.vercel.app. So we can actually open that up. Nope. Yep. There we go. So this is the same thing that we had before. Again, this is all just boilerplate stuff, but now we have written code or created code on our computer, shipped it to GitHub, connected it to Vercel, and it is accessible on the internet. Hello world. Sweet.